My name is Randy Blake. I live at 18 Larchmont Street in Springfield, Mass. Today, the city of Springfield has a very successful and needed changes concerning our diverse population, including a recent created diversity resolution. The mayor gave a very truthful and telling response reflective of maintaining the status quo versus an open, honest conversation about race and opportunity when he said, "I don't give a damn about anyone's creed or skin color. This is purely politics being played here." While City Council is trying to have a conversation, an open, honest conversation about diversity and needed changes, you were not heard, and this was dismissed as politics. As I was preparing to speak about residency, this came to mind. I asked myself, could there be any legal clarity, fact, or factual addition beyond transcripts, emails, letters, and logical discussion that could shock counselors to a purely legal decision and non-emotional response? We could speak about how the emotional arguments that are raised on behalf of the district chief, such as they're a good group of guys, they have families, and despite receiving funds illegally due to a violation of the residency ordinance, this is unfair. These are all invalid, especially in context of someone such as Patrolman Fernandez, an almost 20-year vet of the police department, who was terminated for violating a rarely enforced 1988 law on tobacco products. None of these emotional arguments allowed Patrolman Fernandez to retain his employment. Why are the district chiefs held to a different standard? What causes this disconnect? This is what the Harvard Business Review calls illusion of objectivity, which blinds us to our conscious bias versus objectivity and merit. Councilor Twiggs points out that this vote has been drawn down racial lines. This has occurred for when these district chiefs and a group of like-minded individuals have similar backgrounds or ways of seeing the world, which has been incorporated in your decision-making concerning these district chiefs. This is not based on the law, but this is based on your preference. You ask yourselves these questions. Who do we think deserves help? Who has the bar been raised for, and who is it lowered for? Springfield has not had the best history concerning diversity. We're still under a federal mandate as late as February 21st, 2018, to hire one firefighter, one minority firefighter for one white. We have to ask ourselves, will this status quo, will this be continue to be a status quo, or will this council provide a change to an environment where different backgrounds are welcome and treated with respect? Facts and laws should change and inform your decisions, but if not, by only recognizing your biases, listening, and removing barriers, can you succeed in your initiative and allow all citizens, including persons of color, to be on that dance floor unhindered and truly show what we are capable of?
All right, thank you. The next person on the list is Mr. Charles Payne.
Hello, and good evening. Thank you. Thank the council for having me here. I'm a representative of Carpenters Local 336, which has 99 members as of today in the city. And I came here tonight to talk to you about TIF policy. And I noticed in the TIF policy, construction workers are considered short-term and kind of overlooked. I just really would like you to reconsider that policy and look at it. The construction workers, 1 in 4 construction jobs involves some kind of wage theft in this state. And we have an REO. I think that if we're going to give TIFs to companies or businesses, that they should follow the guidelines that for mandates, make them mandates, not guidelines. That if you don't meet the mandates of hiring people of color, people that live in the city, that you don't get your TIF. To be honest with you, it's not fair to the city. We're making MGM do it, and it's not easy for them. We have to work. We have to open our books. We have to make sure that everybody is getting a fair shake, and I think we should do the same thing. If there's any wage theft on any project that has a TIF, I think that the TIF should automatically be rescinded. There's a project in Northampton. I visited the project. They were getting a $275,000 TIF. There's 4 gentlemen on that job told us they were getting paid cash off the books. So they're getting tax breaks. They're cheating unemployment, workers' comp, and the taxpayer. It's not fair to the city. It's not fair to the people that are paying their taxes that live here. And I'd just like you to reconsider the TIF policy to take construction workers into consideration. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I believe, Councilor Allen, was it you and I think it was myself, you, and maybe Councilor Gomez who had a conversation in committee regarding TIF language. Do you remember that? Yeah, was that the Finance Committee, or was that Echo Dev?
Friday in the committee meeting, you were mentioning the breakdown of workers on Jefferson Street.
I believe we revisited that a couple of years ago, and I think it was Echo Dev, and I think you were on Echo Dev with me at the time. If it wasn't you, I apologize, but we did have this conversation in the past, and I'm wondering if Chairman Gomez would be willing to continue that conversation in committee, and maybe we could sort of come out with some language for TIFs. Okay.
Adding, if when they alert us when the TIF goes out to the council, if we could add some language in there having to do with wage violations. But I would be more than willing to hold a wage status hearing.
Sounds good. Thank you. The last person on the list is Mr. Dave Vignon.
My name is Dave Vignon, and I reside at 36 Old Point Street in Springfield, and I'm a former elected legislator from Springfield. And I want to personally endorse the spirit and the letter from a majority of the council that was sent to the mayor in support of diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. All right, we'll take a 2-minute recess before we begin with our regular meeting. The time is now 7 o'clock. We will begin with our regular meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Councilor Williams.
Present.
Present. Councilor Twiggs. Absent. Councilor Shea.
Present.
Present. Councilor Gomez.
Present.
Present. Councilor Walsh. Present. Councilor Payne.
Present.
Present. Councilor Letterman.
Present.
Present. Councilor Edwards. Present. Councilor Ash. Here. Councilor Hurst.
Present.
Present. Councilor Ryan. Here. Councilor Allen. Absent. Councilor Ramos.
Present. Would the council and our guests please stand and join me in a moment of silence? Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please recognize the councilor in seat number 12?
Councilor Allen. Present.
Just a couple of quick reminders. If our guests could please put your cell phones on silent or vibrate mode, that would be greatly appreciated. And a reminder to the councilors to please turn on your microphones when you're speaking and turn them off when you're not speaking. Councilor Gomez.
No, I was just standing for reports of committee.
Okay. All right. Our first item on the agenda is reports of committee. Does anyone have a report of committee? Councilor Gomez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. On Friday, we had a joint meeting of Economic Development and Finance. I was joined by a number of colleagues from the committee. We met with a petitioner from 3 Chestnut LLC, having to do with state tax credits, 10-year program, which would save the petitioner about $250,000, anywhere from 100% to 10%. The valuation of the renovation, they'll save on the value of the renovation. The developer from before, there was an agreement of a 12A agreement in the 1980s that on the tax rolls that we would be receiving only $60,000, but through this business transaction, through the tax rolls with the new 122 Chestnut Silverberg Lofts, we would be receiving $90,000. Excuse me, and 122 Chestnut has about 99 apartments, which they'll be adding 15 units. Also, it's 90% occupied. We also discussed a lot of different things having to do with the Gateway City projects and why there was a vehicle that was created through this program to be able to incentivize developers like the petitioner that's here today. And we didn't take a vote because we knew that it was a conversation that we wanted more colleagues on the council to weigh in on. And also we had the assessors that was there and members of economic development.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Letterman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have two reports of committee tonight. The first, on February 6th, we held a hearing at the Health and Human Services Committee. Members of the committee present was myself. I was also joined by Councilor Edwards. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss Springfield's cold weather response plan in the wake of a number of extremely serious cold snaps that occurred at the end of December, the beginning of January. We had a conversation with our Health and Human Services Commissioner as well as the Police Department and the Department of Housing about what steps we go through in those types of events to protect our most vulnerable populations, especially our homeless populations and our senior citizens, and had really some great conversations with our Police Department and with our Health and Human Services Department regarding the practices that they undertake to actually go out and find the areas where homeless individuals and families are known to stay and bringing them into shelter. You know, we have a lot of individuals who often won't go to shelter because, you know, for various different reasons, but when the temperatures reach that level, very important for those individuals to be brought in, and I think we are doing a good job now going out and finding them. We also had a conversation, though, about the shelter policies at the Worthington Street shelter, which is really the largest and main shelter in the city, and there are some concerns regarding how those policies go. So we're going to be having continued conversations with Jerry McCafferty from Housing, who does most of the dealing with that, just to make sure that folks aren't being turned away, especially in those very cold weather situations. The second report is for the newly formed Green Committee, or reformed Green Committee, met on February 21st for its organizational meeting. The vast majority of members of the committee were present, and we had a great conversation about what the priorities of the committee would be for the year. The committee is interested in exploring the conversion of streetlights to LEDs. They're also interested in exploring a program called Community Choice Aggregation, which would make more affordable and renewable energy available to residents across the city of Springfield. And the committee is also interested in looking at having some meetings around the plastic bag bans that have been passed in so many other communities across the Commonwealth. We also voted to send a letter to Mayor Sarno urging him to fund the creation of a sustainability coordinator, which is in line with the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan that the city adopted this year in the FY19 budget, and did receive a nice response from the mayor regarding him taking that into consideration in the budget meetings. Thank you.
Very nice.
All in favor of accepting the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening at 6 p.m., I was joined by Councilors Gomez and Letterman for the Maintenance and Development Subcommittee, where we discussed the order of taking for Marble Street. The total award of damages for the eminent domain is $820,000, which includes the appraised value as well as the market rate value for that property. And just as a point of information, that this parcel we split into pieces given to DPW, Emerson Wright, as well as the South End Community Center, for them to have the ability to extend their parking lot. And as stated in the meeting by Jerry McCaffrey and her team, that the certificate of occupancy is needed to expand that parking lot. This also, of course, included the appropriation of $820,000, and that is, of course, paid for by the CDBG Disaster Relief Fund. And then the last step of this meeting was to waive the RFE process for approving the demolition of this property. And the committee, as it stood, the three of us did vote as a recommendation to the rest of the body to approve those orders.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Public Safety Subcommittee met on February 27th. I was joined by members of the committee, Councilor Gomez, as well as Councilor Ryan. In addition, Councilor Walsh, Allen, and Letterman. were also in attendance. The commissioner was present as well, and we had a conversation around the civil service process. He enlightened the council or the subcommittee that he had no control over who took the test, and the main focus of the committee meeting was with respect to the people who are going to be promoted for sergeants. He said he had no control over who takes the test. In addition, we had a conversation around bypassing candidates, and he said he looked at recent disciplinary history, the severity of the disciplinary infraction, as well as the length and time from the disciplinary infraction to the time in which these officers are being promoted. In addition, he looks at sick time and job performance. We also had the second half of the meeting where the public came and had the opportunity to speak to the subcommittee on their concerns with respect to the promotion process, and it was very clear that they wanted to see the civil service process be revamped. Thank you.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Seeing none. Item number 1, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1 is the approval of the 3 Chestnut LLC tax exemption agreement. This item is in committee. At this point, it's been in committee for 30 days, so any member can report out on it. If not, it will remain in committee until the next meeting.
Councilor Ryan.
Well, I think as was explained last Friday, it's a 10-year HDIP agreement that defers about $25,000 a year on average for 10 years, total of $250,000 of the new growth, the additional tax. The owner will still have to pay the base tax, and they will also be paying an additional $250,000 over that same time period in the tax that was not deferred. Over the next 10 years, you could look at a tax growth of anywhere from $750,000 to $800,000. So over 20 years, it's obviously a financially good growth for the city on the tax side. The other issue that we need to think about as we go through with all these jobs that are coming to Springfield, and this council talks about city residents and those kinds of things, well, we have to have somewhere for them to live. Many of those hires are going to be in the 25 to 30-year-old range, and many of them are going to be interested in some of the downtown amenities that are coming our way with MGM and some of the innovation concepts and the food and beverage things and the dining district and all that type of thing. So I think it makes sense. I should also point out the ULI study from control board times talked about the necessity, and we also had an additional study that was done 4 years ago that shows that we need to have an increase in market rate housing in the downtown. So with that as an overriding principle, for many decades I think we were searching and we were always told that there was a big delta between building market rate housing and not building market rate housing. So right now we have this same developer that did the 265 units at Morgan Square. We have an additional developer at Willie's Overland building that's looking at 60, and we're having discussions about many more. So there are a number of market rate housings that's about to come to downtown Springfield, which will bring a new and younger vitality.
In this petition that's before us has been negotiated by the assessor's office as well as economic development?
Well, the Tif Committee is made up of the assessors, economic development, and law department and finance department. Most of the detail is negotiated by the assessors because they're the final authority on this.
And there's state money on this?
Right.
And what is that?
Well, it allows them a certain tax benefits, and it will allow them, I don't want to step into an area that I'm not expert on, but some of their financing is dependent on accessing some of the state benefits.
Can they get to that top
No, I don't believe so.
So in order to get to that second bottom line, there's got to be a favorable vote from this council.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Walsh.
I have a question. The issue that was just brought up at the public speak from the Carpenters Union about construction workers being left out, they referring to this particular item that's before us tonight?
Well, that's generally between the developer and the particular trade. In this one, I've been trying to encourage them both to work together. We're not in a position where we can tell them they have to work together. But frankly, the carpenters are a trade that is very good not only to work with, an expert to work with, but they work very well with developers, and they have a history of that. So it's kind of a general answer, but I don't think I can go into too much detail on that.
Was wage theft, is wage theft in this, out of it, or is it part of it, or that was what was brought before us, and I'm not quite sure.
In the TIF agreement, there's no wage issue, no.
Is that something that can be included in it?
Is that what?
Is that something that can be included in it, amended to include it?
No. Have we
I don't know.
included it? No.
I'm just wondering, because it was a concern to me that a group like the Carpenters would be left out.
Yeah, the jobs that we like to use the least prevailing wage, but it's not a requirement.
No, I think I'd like to make that motion at the appropriate time.
Councilor Edwards.
If I can do it.
We're going to get more and more of these tests. They're not part of the mechanism that runs these economic engines now that are coming before us, and it seems like they're going to start to come on a regular basis. Later on this month, I have the city and the REO committee will be making a presentation to the Committee of the Whole around the Responsible Employer Ordinance. I want to applaud the mayor's office, his staff, on assigning a compliance officer, which for the last several years we've been asking for. It's been funded and the position has been filled. You will be getting a presentation of the study that supports with raw numerical data the need for these types of programs and things. I'm hopeful as these TIFs start to come that they come and are announced in a timely manner that allows this council enough time to be able to vet the requests. And I'm hopeful that as we start to move into the REO itself and its implementation, we will start to talk more about wage theft, and also the idea that these private entities that are coming into the city to take taxpayer dollars to fund their programs are more sensitive and are under the REO, the requirements. They can do it, and we've seen very great results by MGM and several other companies. But the thing is we have to have enough time. Either we have to put that in place before they start the negotiations so that they are knowing what they're walking into ahead of time, or we need as a council enough time at the announcement that they're interested in a TIF that we can start to negotiate and those types of requirements as a part of the award. And unfortunately, I don't think in this particular case we're going to have that opportunity to address some of those concerns. So I just want to make sure that my colleagues, as this is now on the front of your mind, as to something we need to address as we move forward. I know Big Y has announced that they're having a very large expansion. We welcome that expansion. It sounds like a great, great thing, but we need to have something in place because unfortunately, not enough of our constituents understand the TIFs, and they're seeing their taxpayer dollars being diverted to private entities. And if we are not educating ourselves on how we need to be able to respond when they're questioning why a company needs these TIFs and what is the benefit of their tax contributions being diverted, and we don't have real clear understanding ourselves, then we're doing a disservice to the people who elected us.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the issue? Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think this is probably, these questions are probably more for the developer, but Mr. Kennedy, if they speak to you as well, you're welcome. Could someone tell me, so how many units are currently in this building as it stands? 99 units?
Sorry, I should speak here.
And
There are currently 99 units, and the plan is to have 99, and they will construct 15 more for a total of 114.
And how many of those units are currently occupied?
I don't know that.
Who's here from the law department?
About what?
We'd have to ask.
About 90.
And of that 90%, what percentage or how many do you think have active leases currently?
Well, they all have active leases.
So
sir, you would have to come up to the microphone and identify yourself. Name and address for the record, please.
Aaron Papowitz with Silverbrick.
So what's the nature of the, I mean, what are you going to do with the tenants that are there now while you do construction?
So essentially what we do is we follow mass law where we give a notice to quit where they have 30 days. But what we also emphasize is to work with the existing tenants to try to accommodate their needs. So it could be a situation where they want to move into a renovated unit, but for example, they're on vacation for a couple weeks, we'll work with them to give them more time. Or it could be a situation where they want to move to a different apartment community, but perhaps a unit isn't ready in that community, and so if they come to us and say that we need a month before that will be available, then we'll work to accommodate with them.
So they're on a month-to-month lease right now?
Well, there are some that are on a month-to-month, and then there are some that are on longer.
So you're terminating their leases no matter what condition it's in?
Well, when a lease expires, then
Right.
that's when there's a notice to quit.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So when at the end of the lease, so I'm asking in other words, how many leases have not expired yet, and therefore you have not been able to serve them with a 30-day notice?
I'd say approximately 70, but I don't know the exact answer.
And so of the residents who you've served with a notice so far, how many have indicated that they're interested and or able to move into a newly renovated unit?
I believe there are 6 so far.
6 out of the 90 so far?
So far, but there will only be roughly 10 that have gotten notice so far. About 6 of those have expressed interest in moving into a new unit.
So what's the average rent in the building right now?
It's approximately $900.
For a one-bedroom?
That's an average. There's 1 and 2 beds, but that would be an average.
And so what is the proposal? I mean, what are you proposing to rent these at starting after you develop them?
Yeah, so it is market rate, so it will be based upon supply and demand, but I would say approximately $1,200.
The average would be $1,200 up from $9?
Yes.
So about
Roughly.
a $300 increase?
Roughly.
Monthly. And so you're a 3 Chestnut LLC, right? So you bought 122. So you're a private developer.
Correct.
And you bought this from a private owner as well.
Correct.
Right, who owned it before. And so, I think how much for the TIF, Mr. Kennedy, so over the 10-year agreement, how much exactly how much of a break are we giving over the 10 years?
I'm sorry, how much are we what?
So for the length of this agreement, what is the benefit to the developer?
Approximately $250,000 is deferred, and about $250,000 is collected in addition to the current base.
And you mentioned a few other projects that are coming down the line in terms of these types of developments for market rate housing. So you mentioned Willis Overland, and then also the units that MGM is developing.
Right.
And are there any more coming down the line?
We hope so. Nothing in particular right now, but we're having discussions. People are approaching us on a weekly basis saying they'd like to build more units. But you don't want to go ahead and talk about things until you've got a tied up, closed deal and you know the details so that you can explain the details.
Sure. And so there's one thing in the language of this agreement that I want to ask a question about, which is within it, there's a line here that says, and this is for the justification of granting this, I would assume. And you indulge me for 1 second here. So it says here, while the property is technically a market rate building, there is a high number of subsidized and low income tenants. The condition of the property does not attract, quote, market rate tenants. What's considered a market rate tenant?
I'll let you explain that.
I don't know that specific language, but I would think that it would mean someone who's not receiving subsidy, but I don't know exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Councilor Shea and then Councilor Williams.
If I could ask you a couple of questions. These projects, in order, normally when we give out the TIF, the developers come to us first. So in this project, have you already purchased this building?
We have. We closed in late December.
Okay. And when you bought the building, did you have to go and get financing, a mortgage?
Yes, we got bridge financing.
And so in putting the numbers together to get the mortgage, did you project the rents that you would get from that property based on the cost of the building, or how did you do that?
Yeah, so we did provide a pro forma, a 20-year pro forma, which essentially does increase the income over that period. Also, the expenses increased over that period, yes.
So when you did that, did you factor in, even though you had not applied for the TIF, did you factor in those savings, or were you able to get it financed without those numbers?
We did discuss it with the lender. We did preface it where we said that, this is something that we are in discussions with, but it does have to be approved by the city, so we cannot guarantee that it will be approved. I would point out that this is bridge financing and at a very high interest rate. So in order for us to refinance into perm debt, we are going to have to be able to show what the projections will be for taxes going forward. And that's why it's very important for us to have clarity in terms of what the taxes will be.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is if you bought the building and you got the financing and you didn't know you had the TIF, and you had numbers that projected to the bank that the project would work without the TIF, I'm assuming, why would you now come and ask for a TIF that is going to give you back, in essence, a larger stream of income than you planned out when you bought the project? I take it was a viable project when you went to the bank, or was it not?
It was not a viable project for long-term debt. So there's bridge debt that we have in place at a high interest rate. We would be cash flow negative without this TIF. So it's imperative that we have the TIF so that we can then have clarity on what the taxes will be going forward.
So knowing this, I'm just curious, why wouldn't you have come to the city to get the TIF first before you went forward with the project?
Yeah, no, I respect your question, but I actually did meet with the city initially, starting in July. We did have conversations with economic development and the tax assessor, but I will point out that both of those groups were very clear that, we are talking about a project conceptually, and they could not guarantee that anything would be done until it went before the council.
So just in a worst case scenario, if you didn't get the TIF, how does that factor into the project? What would happen? Can you lay that out for us?
It's potential that it could go bankrupt because we will be cash flow negative with the debt service that we currently have.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question regarding the tenants that currently, live at this residence, and for those that are essentially going to be displaced, what have you done to inform them outside of giving them this 30-day notice? Has there been any public meetings or anything of the sort?
There hasn't been public, but we have reached out to each of them individually and expressed what I said earlier, that we will work with them to try to accommodate them in case they would like to move into a renovated unit at a date that's more convenient for them, or to, if they're planning on relocating to another building, we'll try to work with them to give them time for that apartment to be ready. I would also point out that we have reached out to caseworkers if it is a situation where there's a subsidy being received.
All right, and just to Councilor Letterman's point, when you were asked about what does this market rate mean, you mentioned that you think it's described as someone who isn't low income. And I just want to read for the record for not just yourself, but any developer who comes before this council, because it seems that a lot of people forget that tenants who are receiving a federal, state, or local housing subsidy have certain rights and protections under Massachusetts law. It is against Massachusetts law for a real estate agent, developer, or property owner to refuse to rent to you because you have a housing subsidy. So I just want to state that for the record. And I actually intend not to support this tonight because I don't believe that the course of action in terms of coming before us with a TIF prior to the natural progression of how these things go. I think it's putting the residents at this location at a disadvantage for sure.
Can I respond to your?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I would just point out that, market rate housing,
yes,
it still is available to tenants with subsidies. Right. We are required by fair housing to treat all applicants the same, which is exactly what we do. We have the same parameters for every possible tenant who comes in.
No, I understand that, sir. I'm just simply responding to your statement that stated that low income was equivalent. I mean, just because someone's receiving a subsidy, I mean, essentially they are low income. So therefore, you do have to accept them. And I just, again, want that to be said for the record. So thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Yes. Just responding to Councilor Shea's points. At the committee hearing, the assessor's office was present, and they indicated that with respect to this development, they refused to deal with anyone until it had gone under contract and until they had closed, because there were a bunch of people who were interested in the property. So that's why the TIF wasn't done as a condition of the purchase. And secondly, the whole idea of this proposal is to be seed money to get a larger pot of money at the state. There's somewhere between $1.5 million and $1.7 million, according to Brian Connors and the assessors, that could be available on the state end, which if this council doesn't pass it, means that money doesn't go to Springfield, that money doesn't go to this development, and some other gateway community will have access to that money.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a follow-up question on that matter concerning the state component here, and this is for the developer. You mentioned that operating the project as a going concern is tied with the approval of these tax credits. Is that also true for the state component, the $1.5 million that you're applying for?
Well, the TIF is more important to this perspective because that gives them clarity on what the real estate taxes will be going forward. Mm-hmm. But it is important for this project also. Essentially, we will have a loan that needs to be refinanced. And if we are able to draw on those tax credits, it will be easier for us to refinance into a perm lower rate mortgage.
Okay, I understand. Do you have any clarity as to what the likelihood of receiving those state tax credits might be?
I believe it's very likely. We've gone through this process before, at Silver Brick Lofts. We've worked with the city before, and, by all accounts, I think it's been beneficial for the city and the community as a whole. This project does qualify because it's in a gateway city, it's a market rate project, and it fits the other parameters. So I have no reason to think that it wouldn't work at the state level. Mm-hmm. I would just point out that those dollars are on a first come, first served basis. So if they're not claimed by a developer in Springfield, they can be claimed by another developer in another community.
That's getting to my next point. So I understand that there's a cap of $10 million annually that they can allocate. Do you know historically how much they've allocated or how much they've allocated so far this year?
I did speak with the state recently, and she said there are actually applications rolling in now. I do not know the exact dollars amount of how much has been claimed so far, but she made a point of emphasizing that time is of the essence. Mm-hmm. She said that her advice to me was to try to do everything you can to move this forward as quickly as possible so that other developers or other gateway cities are not claiming those dollars.
What was your request from the state agency for the silver brick lofts on Morgan Street? What was the request?
It was approximately $800,000.
How much did you get?
We got $800,000. Rough, that number, yeah.
Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Times like this, votes are hard. And here I think we got to separate, in my mind, the process from the content of this whole situation. And on the process side, there's an ordinance later in this agenda tonight called the Tif Notification Ordinance. And I sense a couple people here, and I myself have had frustration with finding out about TIFs too late and not feeling respected and included in the process. Hence that ordinance is on the agenda later. The idea is to not have that happen again, and to say that when TIFs are being considered, that they need to come before us, not for discussion, but for notification, so that we know what's going on and have a little picture of the things that might come before us. I think one way to deal with the process here would be maybe to amend that later, that ordinance when it comes up later tonight, and include the HDIP, if that's the right terminology here, so that same notification, because what we have here is not a true TIF, it's I believe HDIP, if I'm saying it right, for a real estate incentive, rather than an incentive on a business moving in, like Falvey Linen or something. So if we maybe could take that on as something we consider later on the agenda and amend it, that would deal with that for going into the future. And then we're left with the content. There are obviously some things we don't like about this, or some councilors have expressed some concern about. I totally see it. We also have facing us this incredible economic development splurge we've got right now in places where people need to live. And a section of Chestnut Street, I mean, I was a member of the YMCA that was in that same building 60 years ago. And, it's time. It's time for some redevelopment, some places for people to live. It's not a perfect project by any means, but I think it's important that we consider how much of this we're bothered by the process, which we're going to take care of later tonight, so it shouldn't happen again, and the content, which is this a good project or not? So I just say that to help, so we can hopefully sort out and parse out our thoughts before we vote.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have one last question, please. You mentioned, you said tax credits. Is it the federal historic?
It's state.
State.
It's not historic. It's state HDIP.
State, okay.
Yes.
And do you know the expected time on getting notification if you receive those or not?
It's a 3-step process, so we cannot even apply for them until, if the city does approve the TIF. But once that happens, then we do a preliminary app. That takes a few months. Then there's a conditional award, which essentially is saying, we agree with, the project, but you have to complete the project and then provide a cost certification at the end to prove that we actually did the work that we said we were going to do. That process won't be complete probably until 2019.
All right, and is this contingent, or is this project, the completion of it, contingent on receiving those state credits?
Yes.
So can I just ask, perhaps, that maybe there is a justification for this, why the tenants are receiving this notice so early?
Because we are renovating. It takes many months to renovate. We're not vacating the property, so it's not a situation where a year from now we give notice to all the tenants saying you have to vacate. We give notices in stages over the course of a year, and we also, like I said before, want to work with the tenants to try to accommodate them. So that's why it takes time to go through that process.
And renovation occurs before you secure the estate credits?
Yes. Before it's final, yes.
Well, I know just from working at the largest developer of affordable housing in the region, that for 2 years that, sometimes when, you're counting on DHCD to come through with bridge financing or whatever, sometimes they're surprised that is not successful. So it's a gamble. I understand that you're taking, but I also think it's a gamble for the residents who live there. And that's what's making me uncomfortable about this, as well as the process, as Councilor Shea has stated, and that's just where I stand on the issue.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a little bit concerned about an issue that came up tonight that came from our carpenters union, and a member of them saying that construction workers are left out. Can you comment on that, or what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I was contacted about the REO, and I actually had our head of construction do a survey of the workers who will be working on the project. I believe the numbers are that it's supposed to be, if this ordinance goes through, is that I think it's supposed to be 35% Springfield residents, 20% minorities, and I believe 5% female. We did a survey, and then we actually provided it to the council, where we're exceeding all of those numbers. So, that said, we are strong believers in equal opportunity employment, and, we are a for-profit developer. I don't want to be disingenuous about that, but we also think that the work that we do can be incredibly beneficial to the community, and that's what we're trying to do here. And I would hope that our track record in the city and what we've done at Silver Brick Lofts would weigh in on this.
So it isn't your intention not to hire Springfield residents?
If we could have 100% Springfield residents, we would want that.
Well, we'd certainly like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, Mr. Popowitz, could you just inform us a little bit about Silver Brick, how that's working out, how many apartments, how many people, how it's working out? You made a big investment there, and how that would compare to this property were this to work out the way you want it.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in terms of just the overall arch of it. Both properties had extensive deferred maintenance. These are properties that have received almost, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'll say very little investment from the previous owners. These are properties that are literally falling apart. So at Silver Brick Lofts, there was 40% vacancy. There were units that were down, literally meaning that they were uninhabitable. And we came in and we fixed it. And then we also, created, I think, what most would consider the best housing stock in the community. And I think it's had a big impact on downtown. Similarly, at the current project that we're discussing, is a very similar situation. I mean, we have roof systems that are failing. There are literally units that people can't live in because there's water coming into the building. We have a situation where there's elevators that haven't been updated. There's situations where the access system isn't safe. So we're, providing all these dollars to, create a community, which I think is very beneficial to the city. So I would hope that has some impact on your thoughts.
What is your occupancy at Silver Brick now?
It's about 90%. About 90%.
About 90%. And how many units are there?
266 residential.
And could you just, on a little different tack, but could you just explain one more time to the current residents of 122 Chestnut Street, they receive a letter from you that says you're going to be updating the building, and what are their options when they receive that?
Yeah, so, according to state law, you give a notice to quit where the resident has 30 days to decide what to do. Again, we work with them to see if there's a way that they want to either move into a renovated unit, We also give them time in case they want to move to a different property. We work with their caseworkers if they happen to receive subsidies. We send out letters to all of them, letting them know that they can meet with our property manager. I also, offered at the meeting on Friday, if there's some kind of a group that you think it's appropriate for me to talk to, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to arrange a meeting with the residents and our on-site property manager. So I think we're doing everything that can reasonably be asked, but I would also add that if there's something else that you think we should do, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
Councilor Gomez.
I actually had a housing question, and it just so happens that Jerry is in the audience. Sorry, sir, if you can. It's just because my mind is just going back and forth. I just wanted you to clarify something for me. I know you're here for another issue or another agenda item. Excuse me. So the agenda that you're here for, that property, those folks, because they had to move, right, received some kind of incentive to move. So they were given that that vehicle to be able to find something else to go to, right? So in this particular situation, if the tenant can't afford, right, or something to move out of the building and to be accommodated, is there something that these folks can do through the Department of Housing? Or because I know that only 25 of these units have subsidies because they're moving subsidies, right?
Okay. So yes, I was just clarifying something.
Right.
The other property that we were talking about is public housing.
Right, I understand that.
So I just want to say,
I understand that.
So those people all have a subsidy, and they're being given a different form of subsidy. In this property, at least a number of the people who have subsidies, what they have is a mobile Section 8 voucher. So they actually have the type of assistance that the people are getting in the other property. It is a housing voucher is a type of assistance that goes with the tenant.
Right.
Wherever they rent, they pay 30% of their adjusted income for rent, and the federal government pays the balance of the rent.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to just clarify that. The petitioner? So outside of the 25 residents, if an individual, right, could not find housing within those 30 days, or you said just briefly that you would accommodate them to move into one of these renovated units or work with their case manager. But what happens if some of them don't have a case manager and can't necessarily find a place to go? Would you then essentially, kick them out? Like they would just have to really go and figure it out on their own? And I'm going to get to my next question, and then it goes to my next question. How did you pick the first 10 residents that live in your building to give the issue to? Was there a system or a lottery?
Yeah, it's typically done by the leases that have expired. So okay. There are a lot of tenants of the property. If they have, say, 9 months left on their lease, there is a lease in place. That lease stays there.
The 10 residents that received this letter, their lease was already up.
Correct.
And you said that you're going to accommodate them from some of these 10. You said that the mean of what they pay now is $900, and you said that you would accommodate them into another apartment that you were newly renovated. From $900, they would see an increase of how much?
Approximately $300. But I would also point out that it is a situation where it can be negotiable. If they tell us, look, we can afford this, as long as it's something that's reasonable, we'll work with the resident.
So if they don't find, it's just, clearly it puts me in a position that people are going to have to deal with becoming homeless and not eating. $300 for a person that lives in that building. And I'm totally for market rate housing, and these projects are in the system that was built to create these kind of opportunities for developers like yourself. And what you did with Silverbrook is fantastic. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
But the majority, like he had stated, was that in Silverbrook, 40% of the units were inhabitable. They were run down. There was water coming in. So the TIF that was created was to be able to subsidize that issue. And realistically now we have a building that's 90% occupied. 90% occupied, which we already know in Springfield we have a low housing stock. And we're totally pro affordable housing, market rate housing. We have a lot of things like our director at Echo Dev had stated, spin-offs that are coming. But those things that are coming down the line, they don't have people that live in those buildings, which are actually looking for a new home. And the reason why I brought up Jerry was to clarify that there was a long stance of the tenants that lived at that Marble Street apartment. And some of them had to leave the South End where they were born and they raised their kids, and they go to the park and play, and they had to find other places to live and find other schools to go to and find new doctors. You know, people have been casually, and I understand we're trying to reinvent and bring back, or we're trying to build the Emerald City, but we're not really building with the people. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Exhibit 3 within our agenda packet, within what looks like to be the proposed agreement, it says proposed initial monthly rent, $690 to $1,050. What are those numbers?
That's the current rents, I believe.
No, this says proposed initial monthly rent, market rate residential units pricing plan.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that specific document.
Could we obtain a copy? So this is, so if someone could show them a copy of the document.
Oh, okay.
So that should be amended actually to reflect the actual proposed monthly rents.
So you're telling me that the document that you've given me to make this decision is inaccurate currently?
Yes.
And it needs to be amended to reflect what range?
That's correct.
So right now it says $690 to $1,050. So this range is actually going to be?
It would be closer to somewhere between 900 and 1,800. There's very few units that would be on the higher end of that because those are the townhomes.
So the amendment is somewhere between 900 and 1,800?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll have comments under discussion on the motion, but I don't have any now.
All right, if anyone has any amendments, motions, this would be the appropriate time before we go for a vote. Councilor Shea.
Be a appropriate time just to make some comments.
Sure.
If I could. You know, I think the council is wrestling with a number of issues, as always on this type of stuff. I mean, there's some of us that feel that, you know, the procedure wasn't 100% followed. Maybe the TIF should have been asked for before he went forward. Some of us are concerned about the tenants that are in there and what's going to become of them. But in the final analysis, there's so many issues before this council, we wind up having to balance these items as to what, in the end, is probably the best decision. So when you think about this building in downtown Springfield, and this building has already got apartments in it that are not fit to live in, the building's in big trouble. And if this doesn't go through, and this property went bankrupt or fell into more disuse, then we're going to have, sitting on Chestnut Street, a large monstrosity in which it's just going to deteriorate and become a giant eyesore. And so just taking the raw numbers of this money that would go out to this developer on the TIF, or the money that the city would go without, probably, as I've done some math here, would pale in comparison to what it would cost the city to deal with the derelict property, to deal with the people that would have to be relocated if we had to take it over, and God forbid we'd have to tear it down. Here we have a developer with a proven track record who is going to improve the condition of these apartments. So when the people finally move in, they're going to have far better accommodations than they have now. It's going to be an attraction to the city instead of a detriment. And so weighing that in my scale, while a piece of me wanted to go against it, I can't bring myself to do that given the long-range impact both on the city, both on the quality of life down there, and given what it would cost us if we were pig-headed on this and just let the project die and had to deal with that afterwards. So I strongly recommend that we, in this case, go for this project.
Councilor Ryan.
I concur with Councilor Shea. At the committee meeting the other day, he indicated, the petitioner indicated, it's a $4.8 million acquisition price, $4 to $7 million in further construction to rehab the building. The building is 100 plus years old. It was last rehabbed in 1984, 1985. There's a 121A agreement, which is an old agreement they used to use, which held the property tax to $60,000. By virtue of this petitioner buying it, it's gone to market rate at $4.8 million, and that's the floor. So the city's gained $30,000 a year just by transferring the deed going forward. So by the buyer coming in, the city gets the higher rate and isn't held back to a deal that was struck in 1985. So there's a benefit there. As Councilor Shea indicated, the Chestnut Street corridor isn't exactly Park Place from the old Monopoly game. We have the Kimball properties, which are decadent. We have the building across the street where Antonio's used to be, which used to be a great office building. That's all empty. We have the building on the other side of Appermont Triangle, which is also underutilized. Mr. Kennedy talked about the old Willie's Overland building, which is a long way from rehab. We have the Tarbell Waters building, which is essentially empty. So, you know, we've got to kind of roll out the welcome mat, and to sit here and say no, and the only people who can come in are not for profit, but the historic tax credits for low-income housing, I submit is the wrong message. By statute, by regulation, anyone can apply, and they have to at least look at the application. They can't deny them. And as you know, Councilor Williams, that's subject to real analysis over in Housing Court to the extent anyone feels that they've been denied improperly. But whether you like it or not, Silverbrick, through these two properties, Morgan Square and this property, now own somewhere between 365 and 380 units, because if they build out the other 15 units, they'll own that. But this building, it's a tired building. It needs a lot of upgrading. It needs a lot of improvement. And those things don't happen by magic. They don't happen out of thin air. And one way you do it is by putting some skin in the game so they can go down the road to hopefully get more money from the state to make this as a property that we are proud of, that we want our family members to live in. And if we vote no, then we're saying we're not proud of it, and we certainly don't want any of our family members to live there. So I'd ask that we all vote yes.
Mr. Ash.
Having listened to all of colleagues' testimony and everything in formulating our decisions, I think the most salient point, I think, was Councilor Allen, who said that although this wasn't a perfect process, government is rarely perfect, but at the end of the day, this is a good project for Springfield, as has been spoken about. That building is tired, it's old, and we're going to see a rebirth of it. And I pass that building every day to work, and I look, and I know it's dreadful, the condition that it became. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to jump in head first. And I think with the reinsurance we have from Silverbrook, that folks that do live there now are going to be given due consideration and taken care of to the best of their ability. It gives me some comfort in that as well. I know many of my colleagues have great concerns about that, and I share with that. At the Y, we have many residents in our building that are in the same circumstances. We want to make sure that we do afford them every opportunity. But again, as Councilor Allen said, this isn't a perfect project, but it's a good project at the end of the day for the city, and I plan to support it.
Any final comments, motions, or amendments? Councilor Fenton.
There were some issues that were raised about the current condition of the property. Can you just quickly summarize what those issues were?
Sure. I mean, mechanical systems are decades old, heating systems, ventilation systems, elevators, roof systems. Those are the bigger items. Then if you just walk through the hallways, everything's dilapidated. It's falling apart.
But the water damage that we were speaking about earlier,
yes.
We were talking about Morgan Square at that point, not about...
Both. We have, yes.
There's been ongoing water damage at this Chestnut Street.
Yeah, they're down units of the Chestnut Street as we speak.
Well, I mean, that begs the question of where's code enforcement,
yes.
Right? I mean, have there been code violations issued for the property beforehand? I mean, your predecessor in interest to this property came in and successfully secured a special permit waiver for parking regulations in anticipation of this development. Nobody said that there was leaking roofs and that there were issues with some of the structural elements of the property.
So you're asking why did the previous owner?
I can't ask you a lot of the questions. You can't answer for me a lot of the questions that raises. Are you aware of any code violations associated with the property?
The only thing I know of in terms of a code issue, I'm not sure it's necessarily code. There is a leak in the roof. We actually have already hired a roofer to repair it. He's actually supposed to be there tomorrow. So we're moving as quickly as we can to improve this property.
Have you or your predecessor been cited for that leak?
We certainly have not. I don't know about the previous one.
Before we vote, any final comments? Councilor Allen.
Yeah, just one final comment. I was struggling with this one for the duration of it. And Friday's committee meeting was really pretty good. And some of my questions were answered. Some more of them got answered tonight. And we just have to kind of evaluate what's going to happen if we don't do this, what's going to happen to the condition of that property, how many people will be able to live there then. And, how do we get people into the city to live in properties like this? We need a property that will start to accommodate people. So, I see so many good things happening, and over the course of Friday's meeting and today's meeting, I've kind of come around and accepted the fact that it's not a perfect project, but it's a project that I think we need and will help our city a lot, so I'll be supporting it tonight.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't be supporting this project tonight, and I would urge my colleagues not to support it either. And I'll tell you why. First is, there are issues with the process, but there is also an issue with the content of the project. While I think we all agree that we need to bring market rate housing and more market rate housing into downtown and more upscale housing that'll attract a certain demographic of folks who are interested in that, certainly folks who fall within my demographic. And with the demographic of many of my colleagues who are interested in upscale, apartment living in a downtown area. With that being said, we already know that we have several projects coming down the pipeline that are vacant buildings that are going to be brought back online, put back into the tax base. And in my opinion, that is the type of project that would warrant our spending taxpayer dollars to subsidize it. But when you're talking about a property that's 90% occupied, that the vast majority of tenants actually aren't subsidized, that they are paying a market rate at that level right now, to walk in and tell them that we're going to use taxpayer dollars to subsidize it to raise their rent by $3,600 per year really does not make sense to me. And what I would encourage folks at home, folks in the audience, and folks here to think about is if you woke up tomorrow and was told that your housing cost was going to increase by $3,600 per year, you would not be very pleased. And then when you found out that your city councilors voted to create an artificial market so that that could happen using your own tax dollars, I think you would be even more displeased. And so while I understand that this was a privately owned building and a private developer bought it, if they were doing this with all of their own money, it would be one thing. But to subsidize it with taxpayer dollars right now, to me, seems irresponsible, especially without guarantees as to what's going to happen to those tenants who already live there. We've heard sort of some conjecture about, well, we'll work with them, we're considering working with them, the building is dilapidated. Well, I don't think the building is dilapidated. If 90% of it is occupied, if there are issues, then our code enforcement team should be in there working on it. But right now, I just don't think this is a responsible use of our taxpayer dollars, and I can't support it as it stands before us today. And so I think that is why on this specific proposal, I'll have to vote no. And I'm going to read one more time the language in this that really concerned me, that this was sent to me in an official document. I'm just going to read it one more time, and it says, while the property is technically market rate, there is a high number of subsidized and low-income tenants. The condition of the property does not attract, quote, market rate, end quote, tenants. Tenants are not market rate, units are market rate. And so I'm also really begging the question as to, is this about developing the property, or is this about moving a group of tenants out? I won't subsidize that, and I think to include this language in this was really questionable for this to be sent to us in an official city council document. Thank you.
All right, if there are no further comments, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On approving the TIF. Councilor Williams.
No.
No. Councilor Twiggs. Absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
No.
No. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
No.
No. Councilor Letterman.
No.
No. Councilor Edwards.
No.
No. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
No.
No. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
No, not sufficient. TIF is not approved.
The next item on tonight's agenda is the January Revenues versus Expenditures report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight you have the January Revenue Expenditure report. This represents 7 months of the fiscal year. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we do have some items on the revenue side that we are watching. We also did receive some good news on the revenue side. The motor vehicle excise commitment went out last week, and it increased from fiscal year 2017 by approximately $330,000.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Items 3 through 16, Mr. Clerk.
Items 3 through 8 are petitions from the City of Springfield for the creation of various streets, the installation of stop signs, and the changing of parking limits at various locations throughout the city. Items 9 through 14 are petitions from Columbia Gas for the installation of gas facilities at various locations throughout the city. Items 15 through 16 are petitions from Eversource for the installation of electrical facilities at various locations throughout the city. The recommendations on all of these items is to approve.
Good evening, councilors. Chris Signoli, DPW Director. Item number 3 was on the agenda at the last council meeting and was tabled. It is for the acceptance of 8 roadways in the city to become public ways. 7 of the 8 roadways are existing roads, and one of them is a new subdivision. Alwyn Place up off of White Oak Road is a new subdivision that the city has accepted. The other 7 are roadways that the DPW has gone through and done survey, pavement inspection, utility inspection, and have determined that these roadways meet the public way standards so that we can then convert them into public ways. There is no proposed work to get them to become a public way from the city's perspective, we don't have to do anything. Historically in the city, we've brought before the council about 20 or so of these a year, usually in groups of 10 halfway through we do it 6 months at a time. So I would anticipate that we would be moving forward with probably another 10 or so later this year. I'm going to skip over item number 4 for right now. Items number 6 through 9, Traffic Commission, installation of stop sign on Marmon Street in 2 different locations, and Astra Street, installation of no parking signs at 2 separate locations. Before I go on to items 9 through 16, I just wanted to double check to see if there were any questions on the previous ones. I don't want to go too far. And
Chris, do you mind explaining again explain the process for private ways, turning a private way into a public way?
Correct. The private ways in the city of Springfield, there's obviously a number of them. To accept them into public ways, there are a few things. Number one, the right-of-way width has to meet the standard in the city, which is essentially 50 feet. The roadway must be in a condition that meets public way standards. It must have been built with the correct standards, drainage, cross slope, type of material, etc. A lot of places in the city where developments were built over the years, we have, and the pavement width must be of certain standard, in most cases approximately 28 feet. A lot of roadways that have been built that are private ways in the city are narrow roadways. They don't have the width. They are essentially some tar on top of some base material. So what we do is we go out, we do pavement management on these roadways. We look at we actually go out and physically survey them to make sure that they meet all of the survey standards for the roadways.
Thank you.
Items 9 through 16, mentioned items 9 through item 14 are petitions by Columbia Gas, installation of new mains, abandonment of existing mains, Clyde Newland Street, Orchard, in the north end, obviously Fort Pleasant in the Forest Park section, and Central Street. Eversource installation, Rose Street is just an installation of a new pole, and Oak Grove is an extension of a new service to property for AIC. Item number 4 that is on there is essentially through the Traffic Commission. It was a request, and I just want to find my information here, a request through the Springfield Parking Authority to adjust the rates on the meters in the city of Springfield.
Councilor Gomez.
Pertaining to Clyde Street and Newland Street, are we closing those streets down?
There may be some little closures as we're doing some work on the street, but Columbia Gas basically will be able to keep the streets open as they do the work.
And with Columbia going into, because I know we have a moratorium with After, we're going to be contacting everybody else if there is something that we have to do. We're going to be doing it all at the same time?
Right. All this work is proposed to be after the moratorium is lifted, either the last week of March, first week of April.
Okay.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Signoli, for coming down. I don't have any issue with these petitions, with the exception of number 4. Mr. Clerk, it's listed under petitions, but this is an ordinance change. Chris hit on it very briefly. There's a proposal to make some changes here to the way that we charge for parking in the downtown. Obviously, that is critically important to our economic development strategies. And I'm uncomfortable with this last paragraph here that says, with the yearly option to increase the required deposit to 1/4 for the following 2 years, a total required deposit of $1 for 30 minutes of parking, $2 for 1 hour of parking, $4 for 2 hours of parking. At any rate, it gives authority, and it's not clear to who, to increase it on an annual basis every year thereafter. So I'd like to make a motion that we refer item number 4 to the Maintenance and Development Committee, and I'm okay with all the rest of them.
Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Shea. All in favor of sending item number 4 to Maintenance and Development, chaired by Councilor Williams, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of accepting petitions 3 and 5 through 16, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item number 17 is an application to increase the crisis intervention grant in the amount of $679,857.
Good evening, Jerry McCafferty, Office of Housing. This is a state grant. This looks like a large amount. The increase for this fiscal year is actually only about $30,000. This is money that flows through the city to nonprofit agencies to help households who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It is rental assistance money.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Ryan.
Jerry, with respect, you're saying this is for homeless or rental assistance?
It is rental assistance for families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness.
And it's through whom?
It is through Catholic Charities and Gandara.
Okay, all right.
Gandara specifically to serve youth up to age 24.
Okay. And this would then be through the agencies who work in the housing court for people who are facing eviction?
Not necessarily in housing court.
Catholic Charity shows up sometimes.
Yes, that's true.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye.
Aye.
You guys have it.
Item number 18 is a donation in the amount of $75,000 for the Central Library ramp construction.
Thank you, Mr. President. TJ Plant CAFO for the city. This is a donation from the Museum Association to the city to do the back ramp. Right now, the city put $3.8 million into doing some exterior improvements to the Central Library. The ramp that's been deteriorated serves both the museums and the library, and this is their kind of contribution to the project.
Any questions or comments from the council? All in favor of accepting the grant, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Items 19 through 24, Mr. Clerk.
Item 19 is the East Springfield Library Furniture Grant in the amount of $47,000. Item number 20 is the Library Staff Development Grant in the amount of $10,000. Item number 21 is the National Association of Community Health Officials in the amount of $7,500. Item number 22 is the Homeless Youth Grant in the amount of $5,000. 23, the HUD Continuum of Care Grant in the amount of $3,800. Excuse me. Item 23 is above the threshold. Item 24 is the fire department donation in the amount of $1,060.
All in favor of accepting items 19, 20, 21, 22, and 24, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 23.
Item number 23 is the HUD Continuum of Care Grant in the amount of $3,810,961.
Good evening again. This is funding for existing agencies that, again, serve homeless and at risk of homeless people. This is actually about 18 grants that are throughout Hampden County. The city of Springfield serves as the fiscal agent for all of Hampden County for those grants. I realize they do include wayfinders, as well as the Mental Health Association, Viability, Friends of the Homeless, Center for Human Development, and Gandara. These are mostly existing programs. This is the annual renewal. There are a couple of new slots, actually, again, for youth aged 18 to 24, and there's 5 new slots for chronically homeless individuals that will be, all of those are done on a scattered site basis.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Item 25 is second step on the collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Springfield Fire Chiefs Association.
Mr. President, on behalf of the mayor, we'd like to withdraw the sponsorship for this one to take it up at a later date out of respect to the fact that Henry Twiggs is sick today.
Okay. Item number 25 has been withdrawn. Item number 26, Mr. Clerk.
Item 26 is an order authorizing the mayor to execute a quitclaim deed for the sale of Northside Wilbraham Road.
Save some time.
Good evening, councilors. Julissa Davila Ramos for the Office of Housing. Northside Wilbraham Road, parcel 46, is virtually a landlocked pork chop lot located in the Upper Hill neighborhood. It's approximately 7,400 square foot and has been owned by the city since 2010. The abutter intends to use the vacant lot for off-street parking and a side yard. Any questions?
Any questions or comments from the council? All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call.
On approving the transfer, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved.
Thank you.
Item 27 is an order waiving the RFP process for the demolition of 911 Richelieu Place.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a procedural matter, I believe that the appropriation needs to precede the order authorizing the quitclaim deed as well as the waiving of the RFP process.
Right. So we can actually move forward with the item for the RFP process without the appropriation.
All right. Good evening.
Sure. Tina Quagliato Sullivan, Disaster Recovery. So this particular request is for 9-11 Richelieu Place. This is a two-family home that is currently vacant. The council approved the taking of this property back in June of last year. And they also approved the public purpose, which was to extend Marble Street. The reason we're here is because the RFP process is required by the Historic Demolition Delay Ordinance. The local Historic Commission and the State Historic Commission have both issued opinions that this building is not of historic significance. And the local Historic Commission has also approved a waiver of the 9-month demolition delay. So we are asking that the council waive the RFP requirements for this particular property.
Makes sense.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On waiving the requirement, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea. Yes. Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved.
Item number 28 is an order appropriating $820,000 for the anticipated eminent domain takings on Marble Street.
Good evening, councilors. Chris Signoli, DPW Director. As Councilor Williams was just mentioning, we need to vote on item 28, and then we would vote on item 30. The Marble Street project has been before you a couple times in the past, first November of 2016, and then in June of 2017. We have taken properties along the corridor. The last step in this process is the vacated Springfield Housing Authority property that is at the end of Marble Street, the two parcels associated with the Springfield Housing Authority. And then there is a separate parcel that is owned by the Redevelopment Authority. The Redevelopment Authority is donating the land to the city for this process. The Springfield Housing Authority, the cost for that land is $820,000. And I'm going to turn to Tina and Jerry and see if you want to add anything to as far as the Housing Authority piece is concerned.
Yes, the Springfield Housing Authority has relocated the 46 tenants who are living there. This was in reference to the conversation earlier. They've been issued Section 8 vouchers. They were also paid their moving costs as well as had assistance in searching for units. They have been able to find other units. To address one of the issues that was raised earlier, at the same time, or just before this happened, First Resource redeveloped and upgraded about 350 units in the South End neighborhood. So in fact, people who wanted to live in the South End neighborhood were able to go to those units, some of which had vacancies, had long-term vacancies. This has had to go by the Housing Authority to HUD for approval. The city has also had to seek approval from HUD. The city is needing to ensure that there are replacement units developed in the next several years. Those replacement units are not public housing units, but they will be tax credit units. They are the units that are being developed at the Indian Motorcycle Building, the project called Mason Square 2 by First Resource Development, and the units that are going into the former Brookings School, developed by Better Homes.
Thank you, Jerry. For the councilors, the overall project is the extension of Marble Street from the end of Marble Street where it is now to extend out to Central Street. And the idea is basically be able to open up the neighborhood to better traffic at this point. Right now in that neighborhood, being able to get around a lot of dead ends, a lot of dead area. And the proposal for this project actually started back in 2011, 11 or 10?
2011.
2011 with this project. So this is the final step. The project, the demolition will be starting in a couple months. The roadway project would be starting shortly thereafter, with a majority of all the construction work being completed this calendar year.
Are there any questions or comments? All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the order, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst. Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. If there's no objection, we'll take item number 30.
Item number 30 is an order of taking for the Marble Street traffic project.
Any final comments or questions from the council?
Move the question.
Rule 19, Mr. Clerk?
Yes.
All in favor of suspension of Rule 19 to take the matter up in one vote, say yes.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the taking, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Item 29 is the Valley Bike Share Program Memorandum of Understanding.
Good evening. Phil Dromey, Deputy Director of Planning from the Office of Planning and Economic Development. And I'm here tonight to get the City Council's approval on a Memorandum of Understanding for the Valley Bike Share Initiative that's coming to Springfield shortly. Basically, this MOU tonight replaces an existing MOU that was approved by the Council 2 years ago. The MOU outlines the cooperative relationship that the city has with the lead community, which is Northampton, as well as the other 5 towns that are collaborating within this bike share initiative. The 5 towns include Springfield, Holyoke, Northampton, Amherst in conjunction with UMass, and South Hadley. Northampton currently serves as the fiscal agent for this particular the bike share program and has contracted directly with the vendor, which is Bowegan. The city of Springfield, at the end of the day, will own all the equipment, including the bikes and the stations. And Bowegan, which is a good thing, is charged with operating the system and seeking sponsorship. When the bike share program originally started, we thought we were going to need some additional fundings in case all the sponsors were not going to be able to be signed up. But the company that is charged with running this is going to cover all the cost of this particular program, including the installation of the stations, which a little of the complicating factor here is when we originally started this, they were going to be standard bikes, so they just kind of sat on the street and into the docking stations. Bowegan is going to, the bikes that they're bringing are going to be electric assist bikes. So they're kind of a neat thing. I haven't ridden one yet, but Scott Hansen in my office did. If for instance, you're going up State Street, you pedal normally, and the electrical motor kicks in and zips you up. So the problem with that is now all these stations require power, so it's a little complicated getting these installed, but we are moving forward with that. Just quickly, there's a total of 500 bikes in the entire system with 50 bike stations. Springfield's going to get 140 bikes with 14 stations, and the stations go from Bay State in the north end, Bay State at their main campus, Bay State at their parking lot right at the north end of Main Street, right where the old Bosch used to be. Mercy Hospital main campus, Union Station, Stick in the Armory. We're going to have one near the MGM Development, Basketball Hall of Fame, Stern Square, Court Square, Mason Square Library, North Riverfront Park, South End Main Street down by Central Street, and one station at the La Quinta Hotel. So it really is an exciting project for the city. You know, as you go to most major cities, they all have bike shares, Boston, New York. So it's going to be interesting. So,
Councilor Gomez.
So with one of these bikes, I can take one bike from close to my house and drop it off at another station, and we can leave it there, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's Bowegan will be responsible.
You said motorized, right?
Well, they're not. You have to pedal. And
I walked for a long time, you know. I'm trying to figure it out.
But yes, what you'll do is you can either stick in a credit card, you can either sign up as a member, or you can stick in your credit card. You take a bike from one location. It does have to then get dropped off at another station, and then the company Bowegan is responsible for then shifting. You know, if they all happen to end up at Union Station, they come with a truck and they move them throughout the
I have one more question. Is there going to be some kind of a system that kind of follows this bike around? Or?
Oh yeah, they're all, from my understanding, they're all tracked by GPS.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil, could you just tell me the locations of where the stations are going to be again?
Yeah, so there's going to be two up at the Bay State, one of them at their main campus, and the other one at their pretty significant large parking lot right at the border of Springfield and Chicopee. The Mercy Hospital main campus, Union Station, STC, and the Armory. We're going to have one there. Again, outside of MGM, right now we're thinking at Cross Street, down at the Basketball Hall of Fame, one around Stern Square, Court Square, I think we're thinking right next to the Old First Church, up at the Mason Square Library, North Riverfront Park, which is the Canoe Club, South End Main Street, which I think is going to be on the corner of I think Morris and Maine, where the police substation is going to be, and then one at the La Quinta Hotel.
That's fantastic. I'm really impressed with the breadth of areas where these are going to be located.
Yeah, I mean, there was only supposed to be, I think, when we started the process, there were only supposed to be 8 stations and a less number of bikes that the city was going to get, but Bowegan has offered more to the city, so we're able to get, like, for instance, the Mason Square Library, that was a new location that we're able to get with the additional bikes.
And my mother's a 30-year employee at Bay State, sometimes goes between the two campuses, so I'll be letting her know that she can now take the bike.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited about that. I just want to say it's a fantastic initiative. It's also really in line with improving, alternative means of transportation within the city. And it's actually something that's cited in our climate action and resiliency plan. So this is something we're checking off on that plan, and I'm glad to see it going forward.
Councilor Walsh.
I don't hear anything going on in Forest Park.
Well, not yet. I mean, our goal is, it was originally starting in the downtown area. We're hopefully that these bikes will become successful and we'll be able to expand it. But again, the main issue of the project was to make downtown and kind of Main Street area more pedestrian friendly.
So what kind of bikes are they?
They're they look like regular bikes. If you've been in New York City, you see people buy on the city bikes. Okay. And again, I don't know exactly how they work, but this electrical assist would help you get uphill. but they're basically regular bikes, but they have, from my understanding, they have some type of electronic equipment that tracks the bike and unlocks it and locks it whenever you're.
So with all these different stations, somebody who wanted to take this bike, because it will make transportation easier, they just go up and there's a fee?
Yes.
Or a key, or what is it?
It's either going to be a card or a credit card that you put into the station, which would then unlock the bike. For instance, at Bay State, if you were at the parking lot and didn't want to wait for the bus, you could take one of the bikes, ride it to the main campus, and then put it into that station when you get there. Or you could go from Main Street down to, MGM or the South End, or someone from the Basketball Hall of Fame wants to hop on a bike and. Excuse me?
Is there a limit how far they can go?
No, you get charged. If you're a member, you get a certain discount for the number of how long you have it, but I believe it's an hourly rate that you have the bike. So I'm not exactly sure what those charges are, but you do get charged when you use it, and you'll stop getting charged once that gets back into a station. So you can keep it as long as you want. You can't ride it home, or you can, but you're going to be charged to keep it. So you just
pick it up at a station and return.
Right. I mean, the goal is, again, what we're trying to do with downtown is park once and ride, or park once and walk. So if you're coming into Union Station and you want to just zip down to Mass Mutual building, you can just grab one of these bikes and pedal down to wherever you're going. And hopefully, again, I was just in New York a couple months ago, and these things are all over the place. So we're hoping that this type of, and with the improvements that are being done around in conjunction with the MGM project, we're getting bike lanes and bike stops at the intersection. So with all the new improvements being done around downtown, we are going to get not only the bikes, but ways that people can safely ride them.
Anybody can ride them, no age limits or anything like that? Or
that I'm not 100% sure on age limits, but I believe if you can ride a bike, you can get one.
Sounds like a great project. I can't wait to see you on the bike.
Yeah.
So Phil, is there, by signing this memorandum of understanding, is there any liability for us or anything like that?
No, and specifically no fiscal liability. That was the biggie. We were planning on having to put into the budget a certain number to cover, because what we were working on is getting sponsors. The idea is you get Bay State or Mercy to sponsor at, I forget what the charge was, $3,600 a year to sponsor these stations, and that would help cover the cost. But the company that was chosen, this Bouygues, who's done them elsewhere in the country, has said that they will cover all costs responsible for this. Obviously, they're doing it because I think they obviously will hopefully make money off of this, but they are covering the cost that we thought we might have to come up with if we couldn't get all the sponsors to.
And do you know how much an individual has to pay to be part of it?
I don't.
I had heard in one of these systems $80 a year.
Yeah, I think that's a membership, but then I think if you don't want to be a member, you can get it at an hourly rate. And what exactly that is, I don't know off the top of my head.
So I like the bike, so I'm like this whole thing, but I did see a news item this weekend where one of these stations was in Worcester or Boston or something. And it was, there were 20 bikes just left all over the place.
No, but Worcester's just, Worcester has a program where their bikes are not locked. It's kind of if you've seen them, they're these yellow bikes that you can just take, and they don't necessarily go back to a specific site. So they've been having some issues with them being tossed somewhere.
They were all over the place. At this one area, there were bikes just all over the place.
But these particular bikes, you're going to have to bring them back in order to stop being charged. And I don't know how the Worcester system works, but in order to stop being charged, you bring these back to a station and click them in.
Okay, thanks.
Any final questions or comments?
How are they going to protect?
Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
I don't know. I do not know.
On approving the MOU, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order
Thank you.
approved.
Item 31 is an order to transfer $100,000 from free cash to the Department of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last December, the mayor and the Economic Development Council and business leaders announced a campaign to do an image campaign. So we actually have MGM opening up in the fall, but we have a lot more going on downtown and going on in the city than just MGM. So they decided to do a campaign to raise $1 to $2 million to start educating potential visitors and businesses about opportunities here in Springfield. This is the city's contribution. It's $100,000 that would go to the Economic Development Department to be given to the Economic Development Council or a subset of them to kind of do the campaign. So this is the city's commitment, the city's portion that we've are asking the City Council to appropriate.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chris, I just had a quick question. I got a verbal commitment from Mr. Russell from the Springfield bid right at that podium, and he stated to me, or to us, the body, that the bid would be putting in dollars to kind of showcase the mobile food trucks as they came about. Now, does this $100,000 also encompass that?
You know, I don't believe so. I think if the bid's going to do that, they're going to do that with the money the revenue they generate through the fees that they're charged. This is separate. This is more for the image campaign. Maybe we could factor that in. I don't think it's a bad idea to make sure if we're doing the mobile food trucks is to, continue to market that. I don't know if they're in my mind they're separate, but maybe they're linked.
Well, it's kind of hard to. I mean, I understand the scope of the image campaign as we kind of spur this economic development in the city, but commitments are commitments, and I would feel more comfortable actually talking about this in committee, if to include that conversation about mobile food trucks, if that's appropriate.
Is that a motion? There's a motion to send the items to committee made by Councilor Williams, seconded by Councilor. Was there a second? Seconded by Councilor Hurst. Councilor Fenton on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I respect my colleagues' comments on that issue. I care very much about the mobile food truck ordinance, and I know how much time and effort he put into that. I am excited, though, about the concept of the city spending money on marketing itself, which is something that we have long, in my opinion, neglected to do in an effective way, and certainly that there's other business partners that are joining into this. It's something that I'd like to support, and I'd like to support tonight. I do have a couple of questions for TJ. Who else is participating in this campaign?
That came up in the committee meeting. I know there was conversations with the Picknelly family. There's the Economic Development Council, the Thunderbirds, all those folks that are involved that really want us to market our downtown.
But we don't have an existing MOU or anything that clearly defines
I think
that?
that's the stuff we're still working out, and so really to leverage additional investment, they wanted to see the city's commitment to show that we're going to put in, a six-figure commitment towards it, and then...
Do we know who will be in charge of let's call it the brand of the city? Because I know in the past we've had a lot of different slogans and logos and make it happen and all these different things that just seem to, we had the coasters that were out with Mr. Judge for a little while. So I'm just wondering who will be responsible for overseeing.
Yeah, so I'm working with Ed Pakula on determining how to best give public money to, so we're going to give it to a quasi, which I'd probably be the Springfield Visitor Bureau, or I think they're a subset of the EDC, and ways to make sure that the funding gets it. But I think the EDC is probably going to be critically or very involved in this, and I know there was the article in the paper talking about how this is not going to be the West Mass image campaign. It's going to be something a lot more substantial and a lot more dedicated to Springfield's downtown.
Okay. I think it's a great idea. I want to show that the city's in. I'm excited that the business community is also about to be involved. I don't want to hold it up for the reason that Councilor Williams articulated, but I would like to know who's in charge of the thing and who else is contributing. So in light of that, I will support the motion at committee.
Councilor Letterman on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. TJ, to that same point, do we know yet, is this mostly going to be focused on the downtown?
I think the short answer, I don't think we know exactly yet. I think it depends how much we raise and kind of where we want to take it. I think it's being spurred by knowing that we have, the Dr. Seuss Museum just opened up. We have a lot of these neat things. You got the Basketball Hall of Fame is going to go through a rejuvenation process. So we have all the stuff that we want to market. And we also, we have world-class parks and everything else. So
yeah, that's great. So we're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a great proposal. I think we've long struggled in Springfield with a perception issue versus the reality that we live every day in the city of Springfield and love living in the city of Springfield. So I would love to see it be a little broader than just downtown. I'd love to see it also have a component that focuses on our neighborhoods and attracting residents to come here. So I would be willing to support a motion to committee on the basis, though, that, this is not, right now we're still figuring a lot out. So us sending this to committee just to talk a little bit more about it so we could have some input, I hope that wouldn't be a signal that we're not supportive of it.
I wouldn't take it as that.
Great.
I would definitely articulate the support I'm hearing, that it's just need to have a little bit more information for it.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Councilor Edwards.
I rise in support of this going to committee. I think spending $100,000 for marketing is the appropriate thing to do. My real concerns is the city, and no disrespect to any of our city employees, but we don't. In the past, we've done such a poor job of marketing, and we keep rolling out other plans. My main concern is not necessarily Marcus or my colleagues' concern of the food trucks, but it's generally this piecemeal approach to marketing and things. We've passed and created cultural districts in the city of Springfield that excluded the Armory, the National Historic Site. We've had, as he said, the coasters. We've had a proposal at one time we were supposed to put trash cans along Main Street that looked like basketball hoops we were shoot on. Whoever came up with Western Mass, I hope I do offend you, because it was a stupid ideal. But my concerns are that the city is not the chief marketer of the city, that maybe perhaps it should be somebody like an MGM or somebody who has the professional company or professional entity, and whatever they put forward, that hopefully is vetted before they roll it out, so that we know we don't have that same Western Mass debacle that occurred recently. That was embarrassing, and I just felt like I needed to say that.
Councilor Allen.
Me. Thanks, Mr. President. When a few of us got elected in 2009 and we were here in 2010, we were fighting over the $75,000 for the bid, and that kind of got straightened out, and we've been happy with the bid, presumably since, and Chris Russell, et cetera. Then there was the Make It Happen campaign, which we didn't make it happen, and the West Mass campaign, everybody heard about that. I think whenever we throw money in, I support our marketing as well, but when we throw money into this nebulous kind of thing, I think we owe it to ourselves to know who's running it and how it's going to run and how much money is going. TJ had said in the committee meeting they were hoping to raise $1 to $2 million, I think is what he said. That's fine, and our $100,000 may be a fair number, but I think we deserve a little bit more of clarity on exactly what's going to be done with it. So I support the committee.
Councilor Walsh.
I think it's a good idea, but I have the opposite concern. Okay, whoever I'm talking to here.
That's our chief marketing officer.
Right.
Why isn't it in-house? I don't know how much I like giving it out to all these other people, particularly the ones with the West Mass campaign that was such a disaster. So
I think it's going to be a collaborative partnership is what we're hoping to make it broader, so it's not another Make It Happen campaign, which wasn't in-house.
Yeah.
That once you come up with a nice brand, it's like, how do you sell that brand? And I think we got the first part right, getting a slogan, but I don't think we had the ability to sell it after that. So that's but it'll be a collaborative partnership.
Right, I'm not opposed to it, but I also feel like we should get more answers in committee.
Completely understandable.
Any final comments? There's a motion on the floor to send the matter to committee. All in favor of sending it to committee, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. That matter will be sent to the Finance Committee chaired by Councilor Ryan.
Item 32 is the TIF notification ordinance. This item is on for second and third step.
If anything.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. It's a pretty simple ordinance. We've talked about it a few times. It simply says to notify us when the state application is made to the state so that the council finds out about it. I think I would consider maybe an amendment that maybe it should include HDIP agreements as well. But I'm open to any suggestion on that. Clearly, TIFs are controversial based on our vote earlier tonight. And when you support one, when you don't, what's valuable, what's not, what opinions are more, are considered more highly than others. But this is clear. This is about just notifying us when we're in the loop, because we clearly haven't been in the loop. And this vote earlier tonight, I don't think is a good vote for us. I'm not saying that it shouldn't have, but it's divisive amongst us. How we handled it. It's divisive amongst us. And we got to be careful about that, because we don't want to be divided against ourselves. So hopefully we'll all support this and see what people have to say.
Mr. Clerk, before we move on, just for clarification, would an amendment such as the one that Councilor Allen suggested prevent us from taking second and third step tonight, or would we have to go back to first step?
I think it would depend really on they haven't laid out any language for the amendment. I think it would depend on the nature of the amendment that may cause it to restart. Because this is an amendment to an ordinance, you could pass the amendment as it exists and then submit another amendment at a future date once you've had, finalized the language.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree. I think the meeting tonight is a perfect example of why we should have this TIF notification, because it seems to me whenever these TIFs come up, we're always put in the situation where we really don't like it. And there's so many problems with it. But, as Councilor Shea said, what happens if you don't do it? And I believe Councilor Fenton asked the question tonight about when you put in the TIF. The guy said July. Mm-hmm. And here we are in March, and we're voting on it. So I think there's many, many reasons why this should be supportive, and the City Council should know more about it before we get to that point where if we vote against it, it's detrimental to everybody in the city. So I support it 100%.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say I want to thank Councilor Allen for his work on this. This is an ordinance which in a lot of ways is akin to one that he and I introduced a little bit close to 7 years ago now, that required those biannual reports, the one that Mr. Connors sent out to us by email earlier this week. And I would just say that during the public speak out portion, there were some good points raised by a representative of the Carpenters Union, and there was some healthy discussion here led by you, Mr. President. I would be very supportive of making additions and or changes to this notification ordinance through the subcommittee process with Councilor Gomez and hopefully others. But tonight, what's before us, I think we can all agree is a good proposal, and we've already been at it for a couple of hours, so I would be opposed to amending it at all tonight. I think we should just take second and third step, and then if we have additions or other substantive conversations to have, I think the best place to do that would really be subcommittee, because there's a lot of moving pieces to each of those decisions.
Councilor Allen.
I agree with Councilor Fenton. I'm happy to withdraw the amendment and just vote on this tonight as it is.
Any final questions or comments for the council? Seeing none, we are taking second and third step tonight under Rule 22C. We can take those two steps in one single vote. All in favor of invoking Rule 22C, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call.
On ordaining the amendment, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Ordinance is approved.
Item 33 is the amendment to Chapter 73, the Personnel School Release Policy. This is on for second and third step.
Councilor Fenton.
Just hope we can take second and third step tonight. I should say what it is. It's just to amend the policy for time off for city employees to include a broader definition of what would constitute an allowed time off for a child's school event.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of invoking Rule 22C, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On ordaining the amendment, Council Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Council Twiggs, absent. Council Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Council Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Council Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Council Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Council Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Council Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Council Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Council Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Council Ryan. Yes. Council Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Council Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Ordinance passes.
Item 34 is the Chief Diversity Officer Ordinance. This is on for first step.
Council Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right. So I'm quite sure that, my colleagues have heard some of the Chief Diversity Officer Ordinance discussion, whether it be in the media or just from fellow colleagues. And I feel that the reason that this was drafted is because Springfield is lagging behind when you look at the steadily increasing trend to hire a chief diversity officer for either municipality or be it by a corporation. Our neighbors, such as the City of Boston, City of Worcester, other corporations such as MGM or Mass Mutual, they have these positions in place for specific reasons. And those reasons rely in the language of this ordinance, which pretty much is broken out into 6 components. The first being that this individual hired will work with the personnel director, Mahoney, as well as other department heads, and directly report to the mayor. The second point is this person will be charged with developing, implementing, monitoring programs aimed to increase diversity in hiring leadership, career development, diversity training, strategic planning, recruitment, and retention. The third point, collecting, analyzing employment data. The fourth, community engagement to expand the applicant pool. So actually going to academic institutions, going to nonprofits and some social organizations to look at and select applicants to apply for city positions particularly. The fifth, serve as a point person for employment diversity issues. And the sixth point, develop a career advancement plan for city employees looking to move up the ladder for upward mobility. So a component of this ordinance, very much in the same light that we just kind of voted on in regards to the TIF, is having a semi-annual meeting twice a year where this individual comes to report to the council on progress, on initiatives, as well as some duties and functions of their position. Now, I did mention that when you look at the grand scope of the Chief Diversity Officer, in essence of what it entails, the city of Springfield is lagging behind in Massachusetts and nationally. Again, the City of Boston, Worcester, corporations like Mass Mutual, Bay State, and even the academic institutions that we've all heard about, especially in the area, they have this position in place. Now, with all of the spurring economic development coming to the city, for residents that live within our borders, as well as people that are looking to move into Springfield, they look at this person, they actually seek this person out. I've actually read testimonials online of people who are moving to new municipalities, looking to work for the city because they have prior city experience and are looking for that representation. Now, just to kind of dispel or debunk any myths that this is in some shape, way, or form aimed to meet a certain quota is incorrect. That is not what this position is for. This position, actually, that might be more categorized or more fitting for an affirmative action officer per se. This person is responsible for the community engagement piece is really essential to this, where they are actually expanding the applicant pool, having a wider range of people that are reflecting different ethnicities, genders, and so be it. Now, if you look at, just to kind of compare some of the larger corporations that many of us know, when you look at Pinterest, I know some of us might be keen on that. Candace Morgan is in that place because 11 of their 89 engineers were men. Now, that number has significantly increased to 26%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but over the course of the short amount of span of time that they've had that position in place, I think that's significant work. When you look at Salesforce, Tony Profit is their Chief Diversity Officer, and he was charged with closing a $3 million gender gap, which is, I think, very significant. When you look at Facebook, Maxine Waters is in place, and she is charged with having the corporation or the social media entity better reflect the demographics that it actually serves or its users. So we can see several examples where corporations that certainly have a larger budget than the city of Springfield are putting these positions in place to expand their applicant pool. And the reason that Springfield needs to be on that list with the name to be determined, because our department heads specifically do not reflect the makeup and composition of the city. Now, 60% of the Fortune 500 companies that we all know, or know most of them, also have this position in place. So organizations and corporations are realizing the significance, and again, that number is steadily rising. Now, when we look at this, just kind of on a morale kind of a spectrum, it really boosts employee morale when you have representation or a person in position who can handle concerns related to diversity complaints, diversity issues, however that it looks. And I know that particularly well myself. So, which contributes, again, possibly to a lower employee turnover, because people who are department heads who happen to be African American or whoever, they feel that there's a person that they can go to handle their claims, as well as, again, just kind of boosting the morale within the city department for inclusion. And this person will also be charged with professional development opportunities. There's, of course, opening the door to trainings such as healing racism, and so forth and so on. Now, I would hope just by filing this ordinance that this is not seen in the same light that it's been described publicly. This is not personal. This is not political. This is something that I think we can really stand in solidarity on and be a full body that passes this, because it is needed. And it is the developing trend that we need to be on. Now, it is my intention tonight to send this to committee, actually, because I feel it's an important feature to actually engage Danny Hall, who is on record the affirmative action officer for the city, as well as Bill Mahoney, to discuss kind of over the course of, I think, almost 25 years since this position has been in place, the affirmative action officer, kind of the progress that's been made. Some folks have said this is redundant. We don't need it because we do have an affirmative action officer, but their role is specifically and distinctly different if you look at the job description. And I think Bill Mahoney can speak to how we kind of came to this under Charlie Ryan, and where we are now in terms of making sure that we are inclusive as a city government. So, again, that is my motion on the floor, to send this to subcommittee to have those discussions and further deliberations, and of course, hopefully come back to the council for a vote that I hope we can all stand together on.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Williams, seconded by Councilor Hurst, to send the matter to committee. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilor Shea.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea the way you describe it. I would hope that in the committee that we would take a look to see a lot of these duties, if someone within the personnel department were assigned those, someone in the other office that you mentioned could work on this. But my concern is that while we need this, when you put a label on something that's chief officer, whatever that is not a beginning salary. And the budget-wise, we have issues creating jobs. And so it's probably an inappropriate time to use Rule 20, but I think we need to find out the parameters of what the cost of this is going to be and how that's going to fit into the budget. Because we struggle every year funding everything. So I think that that's a key piece that is missing in the outline as to, can we work this into staff we already have? And what is the cost of this going to be? Because I think those are critical pieces. So I would support this going to committee.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you. A couple of things. There has been a lot written about this and comments being made, and I think it should be perfectly clear that this is in no way an attack on the person who is in that position. I'd be very uncomfortable if we were being critical of, and I don't want to mention the name because I don't think that's appropriate, but I'd be very upset if that was the purpose of this, because I think he's been doing a good job. But I have to say that I was at the budget hearing today, and they are talking about cuts. So, I mean, I have to agree with Councilor Shea. It'd be a good idea to look and see, what kind of costs are involved, because it might not be financially feasible. I'm also concerned that the City Council maybe be going beyond the scope of what we are supposed to be doing and creating positions, and also be very uncomfortable if this was some kind of an attack on the charter and the way the city government is being run, because I couldn't support it if that was the goal.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Walsh, I appreciate your comments, and I do think, with all due respect, I think if it's the time to spend money, it's now, and it's for this position.
Well, as long as you have it.
As long as you have it, right. But that is the mayor's role as well, to make sure and to allocate that money for the position. This body, I think, votes on the contents of the ordinance for passage or for not passing, and I think the next step is out of our reach, out of our scope, and out of our context. So with that being said, you can look at this and say, well, I hope he does it, or for others, it might be, I hope he doesn't do it. But my reasoning for filing this is, of course, not to attack the person in this position, because he's been in that position for a very long time, has served the city for a very long time. And secondly, in regards to an attack on the charter is it's definitely outdated. So we know that so if that's what we need to deal with, then that's what we need to deal with. But I think through a subcommittee meeting, we can make that determination. And just lastly, I don't think you can put a cost on the value of this position. It's really something that's in kind, that comes and develops, and you'll start to see over time. And in a changing environment like Springfield is, where you have numbers of minorities that we've never seen in prior years, I think it's the appropriate time to pass this. So those are just my comments.
Councilor Letterman on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take a moment. I'm going to support Councilor Williams' motion to send this to committee, but I also want to take a moment to commend Councilor Williams for his leadership on this issue and for moving this conversation along. I think it's a very important conversation for us to have, and I think it's very evident by the discourse around it that it isn't an easy conversation to have, but that makes it all the more important. I'd also say that what I think this position is really looking at is us as a municipality making a commitment to really ensuring that the best person for the job has the opportunity to apply for it, to be considered, and then ultimately to be hired. When we talk about growing the applicant pool, that's what we're talking about. We're not calling for people to lose their jobs. We're not calling for a personal attack on anybody. We're just talking about moving forward, bringing a commitment forward. And I think it's evident that this is a best practice in corporations and organizations across the country and in municipalities. Right here in the Commonwealth, I've looked into it. Boston has a chief diversity officer. The city of Worcester has a chief diversity officer, and they're doing some good work. So I think it's something worth considering here. And I'd also point out, and while I think the budget for it is a conversation to have in committee and a conversation for the mayor's administration to have, in my very short time here on this body, I've received multiple requests from the mayor to allocate funding that is at our discretion in terms of free cash and things like that to create positions that he thinks are important for city government. And I think those positions were important too. That's why I voted in favor of them. I also think this one is important, and I think a number of our colleagues do. So I think it's a very good conversation for us to be having. And again, I commend Councilor Williams for bringing it forward.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to point out that I teach at Springfield College, which most of you know, and Springfield College named a chief diversity officer about 3 years ago. Some of you might have met him. He's become a personal friend of mine, Calvin Hill. Goes by Dr. Calvin Hill. Ironically, next week when the March 19th meeting moved to March 12th, I'm not able to come next Monday because that meeting moved, and I will be with Calvin Hill on a bus trip to Washington to go to the African American Museum, the Holocaust Museum, etc. So there will be a mix of 36 students and 4 or 5 faculty and some other people who work at the college. And I mentioned that because ironically that's happening next week, which is spring break, and I won't be at the meeting, but it also demonstrates the other things that a chief diversity officer can do. There's a lot of consciousness raising. I have Calvin speak in almost all of my classes. He's really good in class. He's gotten better as time's passed. He's done a good job of awareness and consciousness raising about what diversity is, and he has a great vibe about him in terms of how he interacts with students and stuff. So it's the hiring thing. I know you're focusing on the hiring or increasing the applicant pool, but there are other things that his role is called Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer. So he's got a couple titles there, but he's well regarded on campus and a great guy. So that's my exposure to this role.
Interesting.
There's a motion on the floor to send the matter to the General Government Committee chaired by Councilor Edwards. All in favor of sending it to committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item 35 is the Facebook resolution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise as the lead sponsor of this resolution. This is actually the return of a resolution that was passed by this body nearly 4 years ago to the date. I think it was passed March 24th, 2014, and the lead sponsor was Councilor Hurst out of the Young Professional Committee. What this resolution does again is says that the City Council goes on record as being in favor of creating a Facebook page. This is in keeping with what a lot of other city departments have done. The Library Department, Department of Public Works, the Election Commission, and the Mayor's Office all have Facebook pages that are maintained by their staff and spread awareness in the community of the works of those departments. I use Facebook in my capacity as a city councilor, and I know some of my colleagues do as well, and I find it to be a really great way to share information with our residents. A lot of folks, especially now, still use Facebook as a way to keep up to date with current goings-on, around the world, but also right here in Springfield. A practice I've started doing is posting at the beginning of each week all of the city council committee meetings and regular meetings, and I've gotten a great response from folks, but I've also gotten some calls from folks as to how come this isn't done as an official part of the city council. And so I have had some conversations with our city clerk, who runs the clerk's office, with the folks who work in our office, and also with our IT director, Andy Doty. A lot of the issues that had been brought up before were worked out. But we never actually saw the page go live. And so I think we should go on record again as saying that we are in favor of moving forward with that process. And I would envision this as a page being, and it mentions it in the resolution, as a place where things that are germane to the body as a whole are posted. So agendas, proclamations, videos from Focus Springfield from the night before you can link to, things of that nature. So what we're really talking about here is just putting a broader public face to the council and providing a little bit more transparency, accountability, and information to our constituents.
I too rise in support of this resolve. As my colleague echoed, it did come out of the Young Professionals Committee a few years back, and it was met with a lot of opposition that I'm hopeful it won't be met with tonight. I'm appreciative to you for seeing this to the finish line. I think it's something that is important for the residents of Springfield. I think there's a whole different cadre of people that won't sit down and watch a city council meeting or certainly are not aware of what is happening within the city, and I think this can certainly serve as an alternate medium for them to be informed. So I appreciate you bringing this back to the forefront, and my hope is that you will take this across the finish line. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to, I'm in support of this because last year I felt attacked because I used Facebook to reach out to people, and nobody stood up for that. Not saying nobody, a few of you guys contacted me, but nobody said nothing to the person and how the media portrayed for me being gutless for using Facebook as a tool to reach out to some of my constituents or to bring up some things that I thought that were just completely innocent. Things that you just casually put online or discussions. You know, it's the new way of information going out, and there's other social media platforms that could be utilized, but I believe being able to share the YouTube videos that go out there, because a lot of folks don't find them and can't find them, but this gives us a way that whoever is going to be operating the Facebook, if the Facebook resolution passes, that it's not run by anybody from the council, and nobody from the council would be able to post to the page. It would be somebody hopefully from that works with us, and it's from the clerk's office, I believe. So I believe this is a good thing because it gets us a chance to engage the younger population on the way that they kind of get their information. But for the most part, you know, I'm happy to support this. I would love to be a co-sponsor just to make a point that, you know, Facebook is right now a way of information and how it gets out there. So I just want to say this is a great start to getting information to the younger generation, and in a way that we can probably get other generations of people to getting with what's going on.
I rise as a co-sponsor of this resolution as well, and I'm certainly happy to support it. I think it's a good idea, and unfortunately it took these many years for it to come back again. But I wanted to point out that just earlier today I read an article, and I apologize. It was either the Washington Post or the New York Times that talked about how many millions of children in this country do not have access to internet in their homes. So even within the city of Springfield with the demographics, we have this misconception that everybody is on Facebook. That is not correct. But one of the things that I had repeated conversations with my colleagues is that we constantly get bombarded with the statement from our constituents that I didn't know. And I tell them time and time again, the real issue is if you can solve that problem, you can solve a whole host of other issues related to the fact that our constituency doesn't know. This is just another step in the right direction of doing that. I am not putting on the blinders or just blindly believing that by us creating this will solve the lack of attendance at our meetings, or it's going to increase voting across the city, or any of those more larger, more broader issues. But the reality is that we should have this. I mean, I believe my colleague mentioned something, and I quickly reached over to my younger colleague to my left and said, well, it was Pinterest. Pinterest, okay. Because I didn't know what that was, but I thought it was something to do with an internet thing. So let's not fool ourselves to think that everybody is going to be on Facebook, that this will solve all the problems. But it eliminates us another step in the direction of eliminating the excuse of people constantly telling us the lie that they didn't know, because when it's important to you, you find a way to find out. And so that's my commentary on that. But I stand in support of this resolution, and I'm very proud of my colleague for putting it forward again. First time for him, second time in the chamber. Thank you.
Maybe we should be on Pinterest as well.
Is that an amendment, Mr. Chair?
On this initiative, as a matter of fact, I believe I'm one of the sponsors because finally there's going to be a place for me to put all the pictures I take. But one thing I would like to see in that is I think we, as a council, we do so many good things and we recognize so many wonderful people in the city of Springfield at our proclamations, and this is a great venue to share all the good people that make Springfield such a good place to live and work. So I'm 100% for it.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
There's one final item on the agenda under suspension. If there's no objection, we'll take that item.
Item number 36 is an order approving a 4-year lease for SBS computer equipment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is not new to the City Council. Every year we're before you authorizing a new 4-year lease. As you know, this Springfield Public Schools is going to a 1-to-1 device, so every student gets access to a device, either through a laptop cart or through a take-home device. So this is just authorizing the school department to do a 4-year lease. Anything beyond 3 years has to be approved by the City Council.
Is there any discussion? Councilor Edwards.
I'm very happy to support this, and I'm happy the kids are going to get to have a computer that they can take home. Thank you.
Right, there you go.
All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the order, Councilor Williams. Yes. Councilor Twiggs absent. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved. Is there any further business before the council?
There's no further business.
Seeing none, our next meeting is going to be next Monday. Next Monday, March 12th.